Hi, welcome to the Mohua show. My name is Mohua Chinnappa and I am an author, entrepreneur and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से. Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Dr. Shiv Sastry. He's a retired surgeon with an interest in linguistics, military aviation, and strategic studies. He has an active YouTube channel on military aviation with over 50,000 subscribers. Yes, you heard me right. Military aviation. He's the author of the book called Aryan Invasion, Myth or Fact, and is in the process of publishing a book on Pakistan. Welcome, Dr. Shiv, in today's episode.
Thanks very much, Mohua. It's an honor. It's my honor. Thanks very much for having me on here.
So, Dr. Shiv, being a medical practitioner, can you please elaborate on how your interest gravitated towards the military?
Actually, my interest in the military started before I became a doctor, before I entered medical college. I was 7 years old when my cousin, who was in the Air Force, actually gifted me with a book on aircraft. And I was totally hooked. For some reason, I was hooked. And that's how it was. And I've literally followed military aviation now for 60 years. So, and then it helped that my cousin himself, fought in the 65 and 71 wars as a pilot, won a Veer Chakra, took part in the Longewala battle. So I heard all those stories live, and I've put them on videos as well and in my writing.
How wonderful. So can you share a little bit of your experience, with military and aviation for all our listeners here? Because it's such an interesting topic. Just recently, Putin has come up and said some huge rhetoric and the world is actually really on tenterhooks. How does this work really?
Well, the funny thing is most boys want to become pilots. They may want to become engine drivers or something like that first when they're kids. Later on, it's nowadays pilots, everybody. So I'm just like any other boy, a failed fighter pilot. I actually wanted to go into the NDA, but it was my mom who hid the entrance exam card. She hid it. But then I was interested in medicine as well, and I went in. So military aviation is a very fascinating and a broad subject. And because I followed it for so long, I just happened to know a lot more than a lot of people, including retired people from the Air Force. So.
How amazing. And what about the content creation that you do on social media? Tell us a little about it.
Yeah, see, what happened is I got interested in computers relatively early, and I was deeply disappointed in those days that we couldn't do videos like we could do now. I scrounged and saved and got hardware to make videos, and I was literally the first person to put Indian Air Force videos on the internet. I had videos which I put on there. And what's happened is in those days, you could pick up any video anywhere and put it up. But it doesn't happen like that now. So what I do in order to write my stories is I have taught myself 3D modeling and 3D animation. So all the aircraft that are there, including some of the aircraft you spoke about, the Russian aircraft and the Indian aircraft, things like that, I've done 3D models of them. And I tell stories using modeling. So, if I have to say, a plane is taking off or crashing or fighting, I do a 3D animation of that and tell my story along with that.
So, of course, we know with, content creation, there's so much of criticism. There are situations that sometimes people face. And I think there may have been a situation where your Twitter handle was suspended. And so, being a content creator, how difficult it is to handle the criticism sometimes that you get.
YouTube is very easy. I've been on it for a very long time. Their rules are very, very clear. So I've never had a problem with YouTube as such, although other people claim they've had problems. Twitter is a little bit more difficult to predict. Well, I did get on Twitter because, I was one of the early people on a very large Indian Defense Forces website. It was very restricted. So there's a much better crowd on Twitter to communicate with. Suspicion of a handle is not a big thing. Your friends are still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like leaving a job or leaving your place of residence and going to another one. So it's not such a big deal.
So let's now come to your book called Aryan Invasion, Myth or Fact. So what are the myths that you are, trying to burst among the audience, And your book talks about how Europeans thought that they were the first dynasty. And when they found out Aryans existed before that, they spread a rumor that Europeans, ruled Aryans. And also linguistic similarities of the language between European languages and Sanskrit. So tell our listeners a little bit more, because everybody I hear, they keep really tom-tomming, we are the Aryans and we are the Aryans. I mean, where does this entire complex arise from?
The entire Aryan invasion story was cooked up by the Europeans in order to, what shall I say, to help their own make their own history. If I may spend a minute or so telling you what happened. You see, in Europe, basically, all their knowledge either came from the Bible or, their own whatever little myths they had until until archaeologists found some very old ruins in Syria, and those ruins actually had stories from the Old Testament. So now the Old Testament has more to do with the Jews, the Semites, than the Christians of Europe. And the Christians of Europe during this time, who felt that they were the superior race going abroad, they were very upset, and they said, "How can the Jews have an older history than us?" And they were looking desperately for things to improve their own, their own status, their own history status, when they found Sanskrit. And until they learned Sanskrit, they never realized how European languages were related to each other. So then they said, okay, here's a very old language. This language is older than the Jews. So therefore, this is our history. These were our people. Very long ago, we were the Aryans who came to India and conquered these black people and sent them off to the south. This was the story that was cooked up. So there's a lot of evidence against this, but it's taken me, some 15 chapters and 400, 500 academic references to write the book. So this is how it is. The other thing is, a lot of people in India felt very happy when the white people came and said, "Oh, you're fair, you're like us." And this is a problem all over India. You find people thinking, I'm fair complexion, I must be Aryan. I met a doctor yesterday, good friend of mine, says, "But don't you think, see, look at my eyes, I've got light colored eyes, I must be Aryan." So there is this problem as well. So
it's such a complex that stays on forever, and
yeah, factually it's wrong.
Let's just talk a little bit about the migration theories that you've quoted in your book. The Aryan Invasion migration theory postulates that ancient Indians did not know of horses and that they were introduced by the invading migrating Aryans from the steppes. According to the Ashwamedha Yajna, horse bones were found in many places in India, from Bogor, Rajasthan to Halur, Karnataka. So tell my listeners a little bit more, because most people think that, the invaders came in with their horses, and that's how that we learned about horses.
Oh, that is fake, actually, because there's a lot of horse evidence, actual horse evidence that has been dated from dated by actual scientific methods long before that. But, the point is this, nowadays when we talk about science, we talk about scientists. But when these theories came up, these were all done by linguists. And the linguists wrote their books and they made them into academic textbooks. So nowadays when people read books, they're still reading those old things and believing that. It will take a long time to change people from this. And it was not helped by certain historians who also believed it, because they learned the same. After all, if your teacher teaches you something, you're going to learn it. So our historians have been taught that, and this is what they learned. And it's up to scholars to come up with the correct evidence rather than fighting and arguing and saying, "You're silly, I'm clever." Look at the evidence that's available and then see what actually happened. There have been hundreds of migration, but there was no Aryan migration. The word Aryan was taken from a word in the Rig Veda the word called Arya. Now, Arya is just people who follow certain traditions. It's not a race of Aryans. That is to say, for instance, in a society, you have teachers, you have journalists, you have doctors. So it's not that you have a race of doctors. So you can't take the word Arya and add an N and make it a race. For instance, with the word, Sundari. The word Sundari means beautiful woman. You can't add an N and say there's a race of Sundarians in this. So this is the thing. So there was no race as such, and there's no genetic backing either. It's very clear.
So, India was a land of rescue and a place where the victims could take shelter as refugees. But today, with strong laws, these people have nowhere to go. In your opinion, we need such strong laws, or the government needs to be more sensitive? Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, this is a very, very complex topic. There is no short answer. You see, once you have a nation and you have the concept of border and you have a concept of citizenship, okay, then you start cutting down on who can come in and who cannot come in. When there were no such borders, anybody could come in. You see, this is what it is. People could come in as refugees. So here, now if people come as refugees, they have to meet certain requirements, certain laws. So this is how it is. Either we follow the laws or we don't. It's, and this is perfectly related to the topic that originally started our conversation. A lot of these things are interrelated, about a topic that is close to your heart as well. What are the laws? Who follows the laws? Where did the laws come from? Should we follow those laws or not? Are those laws right or wrong? So this is where it is.
With this so much of displacement and the misery that that happens with the human race with migration is not even a topic that's yet been touched by a lot of people. Of course, there are a lot of authors and writers and people who've done work on it. But tell me a little bit, with your experience in the military, can you please quote stories of people who've survived displacement, people who've survived wars? What is the kind of trauma that they go through? Because I think, we talk about them being very brave. We talk about how they've won a war and they've come back. But what has gone through that entire process of that human mind? Refugees, for example, when they have to leave everything behind and you don't know what to leave when you're leaving your home.
Mohua, this is a philosophical question. Human life is maybe 40, 50, 70 years maximum. You have a person who suffers throughout his or her life and he or she dies and it's all forgotten. My own ancestors were driven down from Hampi. So those who were killed, that's all. Those who ran away, and the rest of us pick up our lives. So I think human civilization knows that the refugees problem is just that one generation. Once that generation is settled, wherever it is, the problem is forgotten. So if a wrong has been done, it has to be documented properly in history. That is the important thing. Okay? And if rights have to be given, I think those rights have to be given after correct documentation. If neither documentation nor rights are given, then you have continuing misery. So, like I said, this is more of a philosophical question, and it is there across the world. In fact, if you talk about war and misery and things like that, I think one of the best, there's plenty has been written about partition in India. But if you look at, lots of other things going on about refugees right now,
Yes.
right now. But V.S. Naipaul actually was in Iran and Iraq after the Iran-Iraq war. And he spoke about how, these two countries attacked each other. 8 years they fought a war. And at that time I was in England, and every day for work, I used to pass by an arms factory. And this arms factory was supplying arms to both Iran and Iraq. The same factory, they're making a lot of money from this war. And ultimately, this V.S. Naipaul was interviewing somebody in Iran, and he just shook his head and he said, "What? What is this? We're just tired. So many people dead, so many people gone." Who's talking about it? It's all over now. Something else is happening in Iran, as you can see.
Yeah, in Iran now it's about the hijab.
And it's so hypocritical because on the one hand, you have the US saying sanctions, sanctions, sanctions. And then on the other hand, now that you have women who are fighting to not wear a hijab, now they're saying internationally, no, we'll support Iranians. So, it's all political, isn't it? We support for something, we don't support for another thing. It's all about me. It's all about what I can support and what I don't support. I think these unfortunate things keep happening. I have no answers for them. My field is very narrow. Beyond that, I can just enter into philosophy. That's all.
So can you specifically throw some light on the effect of the mental health issues that maybe some of the war survivors go through?
This is a very difficult question. It is like any trauma, any death, any displacement. It is day-to-day misery, food, loss of parent, loss of child, and things like that, which everybody goes through. How civilized a society is depends on how well you can. For instance, if you look at, say, Ukraine, if you look at news reports from we used to hear about Ukraine, and actually these news reports are live. You have refugees from Syria. They don't care about the refugees from Syria. But then they're saying, Ukraine, these are our people. They're white people. They're like us. They're not towel heads. You see, this is the sort of hypocrisy that goes on. And, what can I say? what can I say about the misery? Because nobody's really bothered about misery.
So just recently, there was this film in India called Lal Singh Chadda. I don't know if you've heard of this. It was hugely criticized for showing the army in very poor light and soldiers, with learning disabilities.
Basically, there was a very good movie, as you probably know.
Forrest Gump.
Yeah, Forrest Gump was an extremely good movie. But what happened was the United States had a policy of actually, the United States can be a very, very cruel country.
Yes.
So what they've done is they used to actually recruit people whom they classified as low intelligence, and they would put them on the firing line in Vietnam. Now, India has no such policy. So you can't really port that into India. So people didn't like the way it was ported into India and used that way. So it is a movie, but movies are also now fair game for political reasons. So I really don't watch very many. I have no time to watch movies. There was a time when I used to say that I will spend 10 years watching all the movies I missed, but I'm just not doing that. Although now movies are freely available to me, I probably won't. I probably won't watch Lal Singh Chadda. I won't watch Brahmastra. I'm actually not going to watch any of these because it's just not me. I don't go for Netflix. I'm on Prime. I don't watch the movies on Prime. So I can't really comment on movies at all.
So what keeps Shiv busy?
Everything. I have a lot of writing. I'm doing content creation. Writing takes up all my time. Creative writing, making video. I enjoy making 3D animations. I write historic stories. I'm working on a lot of linguistics. You see, because there's really a lot. For instance, when the Europeans came, they said that, North Indian languages are like European languages. South Indian languages are different. This is actually a linguistic nonsense. If you look at the methods they use to classify languages and apply the same methods to South Indian languages, you find that they are more closely connected than European languages. So I'm actually going to be present. I've written a paper, but I'm going to be presenting it at a meeting in November later this year. So basically, I'm a nerd. By nature, I'm a nerd. I've spent my life as a surgeon. Surgery, yes, it looks very exciting, but it's a very nerdy business. Because a lot of it is about studying and that sort of stuff. And although it all looks very heroic, you make cuts and you can write here. I wrote a book, actually. I put it online about my surgical experiences. But I pulled it because a publisher was interested. So it was called Blood on My Hands, Tales from the Operating Theatre. The publisher is interested, so I'm waiting to see if the publisher will publish it. But although surgery is very, very exciting, it is basically nerd. Like all doctors, we are nerds. And we're always studying something, writing papers and stuff like that. This is how.
Why did you choose the title Blood on My Hands?
Because surgery is blood on my hands. Surgery is blood on my hands.
Is there any incident that you remember, during your tenure as a surgeon that at a moment that you've been very challenged, something that you would like to share with our listeners?
Every surgery is a challenge. And I wrote this in my book. Every surgery is a challenge. I can remember so many challenges. There's two types of challenges. One type of challenge where you think you're going to lose the patient and find somehow the patient survives. And the other type of challenge is where right from the beginning that this patient is not going to make it. And you say, God, why did you send this patient to me? What am I going to do? So you have both types of challenges. For instance, there was a lady, her entire intestine was dead. See, you have the stomach, you have the small intestine in between, and the large intestine. And very rarely, this whole thing becomes gangrene. Gangrene means dead, it's black in color. So I had to remove her entire intestine, about 17, 18 feet of it. And there was only 6 inches left, 6 or 8 inches. I managed to join it up. So, there have been surgeons and I have had teachers who've told me that when you see a patient like this, just close it up, don't remove it, they're going to die. So I have actually, in my student days, seen cases where the patient was allowed to die because, so in this case, how do you choose? Are you going to let this person die? So I joined it up. And luckily, the patient has a lot of problems when this happens, but there are ways of getting over it. I implemented those ways and she survived, which is very happy. I saw her 6 or 7 years later. She brought a child to me. So that's one thing. On the other hand, you get people who are just going to pass away. And, so there's a lot. I have this book, Blood on My Hands, where I've written all these things down before I forget. So there are so many, there's no end to the number of exciting things.
I think last time when we spoke, Dr. Shiv, we also spoke about surgery for transgenders in India. Of course, we read very horrific reports of how they have to go really into these small towns, and they're extremely conscious of going into clinics because they feel that they may be teased, they may not be treated very well. They go into places where they have a local doctor who sometimes may not have all the sanitization and all the other anesthesia that's available for them. The procedure is done. What are your views on this, and how much of truth is in this?
Mohua, thank you for asking me this question. I came to talk about it. You know a lot more than me, and I would like to learn from you. But yes, I do have some very, very strong views about some of these things. And I mentioned earlier that all these things are related. If you talk about transgenders have been there long before the British came. Okay, they've been there for a long time. Who gave us our penal code? It was the British who gave our penal code. Now, in our penal code, they don't recognize transgenders. That's one side of the story. The other side of the story is me. I'm a surgeon. What education have I done? I've got allopathic medication. It's medication that came from the West. The surgery came from the West, the techniques. Do the textbooks recognize transgenders? No, they don't. So, you don't find anything in your medical textbooks telling you that there is such a group of people and this is what they need. When a transgender has a problem with a gallbladder or a hernia or some other, broken arm, it's like anybody else. But when it comes to the specific question of gender surgery, there's nothing in the textbooks. So what happens? There's a huge gap. The penal code is on one side, which so far until the court recently recognized them, said, no, these people don't exist, can't exist, one side. On the other hand, you have doctors, you have medicine who have no idea where these people are coming from. Actually, now, I have learned not from medicine, but from other sources that at least for those who are biologically male, who prefer not to continue as male, they need to have some kind of procedure in order to, live their lives the way they want to live their lives. Let me tell you, these are the thoughts I had about transgenders even before I met you. These are the concerns I had. From the medical point of view, very, very few children are born as transgender children. They're either male or they're female. Okay, very few, maybe 1 in 10,000 or something like that. So very often transgender is a choice. That is to say that a person says, I don't want to be this particular gender. It's perfectly okay to have this choice. Now, how does this person exercise this choice? Now, you're telling me that they go to clinics and things are done. They never come to hospitals. I've worked in dozens of hospitals. I've read all the surgical literature that needs to be read by a surgeon. There's no question at all. You see, what happens is if you have a biological male who wants to, live his life not like a male, the operation of castration will have to be done. Okay, that means testicular removal. Why testicular removal? I don't know if people know that. You see, the male testicles produce a hormone around puberty. Now, what does this hormone do? It causes growth of the beard. It causes the people to become taller, more muscular. The voice becomes deep like a male voice. So in order to avoid all this, you can do a castration. Now, castration is a very simple operation if it's done safely. Without safety, if it is done by unsafe methods, it can kill. So this is the problem. Now, when you tell me that people don't go to hospitals, I suppose they don't go to hospitals because the law didn't even recognize them. I am sure that during my training days, if a person had come to me and said, please do a castration, I would have said, get out, this is illegal. This is how it is. So, they're stuck between devil and deep blue sea. That is one concern that I had.
This is such an interesting point of view, Shiv. And I am, this goes out for all my listeners. And we have so many people from the queer community that our textbooks does not include them and does not include surgeries of gender assignment.
No.
Yes.
No, not at all. No.
Thank you, Dr. Shiv, for saying
No
this.
surgeon is going to learn about gender assignment. If it comes to doing anything about genders, the most basic operation of castration has been done by hundreds of surgeons hundreds of times. Usually it's for prostate cancer. It's a very simple operation. But the testis is a very sensitive organ. So if you do anything with that, for instance, if a football or a cricket ball hits the testicle hard, a person can die. This is why you find cricketers wearing what is euphemistically called an abdominal guard. Okay, so it has to be once done under proper anesthesia. There's no problem at all. Okay, it can be done that way. But where is it? Where does it? Show me one textbook where it says that people will come to you. You see, the textbook will say all the diseases that people come to you with. There is no textbook that tells you this is what people are going to come for. Operation is simple. But when you head on, now you have in India, or the system in most countries, you have an MBBS, a basic qualification. Then you have a surgery qualification, an MS. Then you have a super specialization, which can be cardiac surgery, gastrointestinal surgery, urology. It's either urology or plastic surgery who will end up doing gender reassignment surgeries. So it's a super specialization. And they are the costliest, and it's always done in the most expensive hospitals. It's not going to happen. It's not going to, because, see, our law doesn't even, the penal code did not even recognize these people until recently. These people don't exist. Where are they going to go? Which hospital they're going to go? Here the doctors don't know. The law didn't. Now the law suddenly says, fine, you're okay. You're human beings. You're allowed to exist. What about the medical profession? Are they included? And in between, there's a nice bunch of quacks who are doing things for them. We don't know how many people are dying. We don't know how many people are being maimed. And there are a couple of other issues, if I may just mention. You see, what happens is when you, especially things like castration and gender assignment, you need to have consent. And if a person is less than 18, you need to have parental consent. So these are all legal issues that will have to be addressed if they come. Person who is born as a boy, who's 12 or 13 years old, and decides that, look, this is not me. This, I feel that I cannot continue to be a boy. And he goes. Now what happens? They're going to ask him, get your parents' signature. We're not going to do this. We want your parents' signature for this. So, these are all solid legal issues because it's the law. Here we have a law that came from England, and we have surgical systems that came from England, and these people are stuck in an island in between.
So do you suggest, Dr. Shiv, that this has to be looked into, because obviously there is a huge conversation and acceptance about queer people today, and people are talking about so many different forms of identity. Do you feel that this is a very important part that needs to be addressed?
Mohua, this is the reason why I am so happy that you called me. I think this needs to go out. See, the court itself has taken so many decades to come out. The court is not looking at the other side. Where are these people coming from? How is, it's okay to say that the medical profession should treat them. Medical profession will treat broken arms, heart attack, hernia. What about gender surgery? What are the legal implications? There is nothing, there's no guideline for okay, you can say that I have plastic surgeon friends who would have, been abroad, and they say, oh, this is what we can do. We can do this kind of reconstruction, that kind of, create an artificial vagina, create an artificial penis, all these things can, but that is not the point. What about the ordinary MBBS doctor? Does he know anything about it? Does he know anything? What about the surgeon? So, these questions have not been addressed at all. I think groups, of these people and people like you who represent them need to go to government and say, this is what is happening. You see, right now, unfortunately, Mohua, there is a mafia that is doing things, may not necessarily be for transgendered, but for beggars also, that the country is not looking at. There are, I find some beggars on the road who have medical deformities that are impossible. Impossible means you have to break a child's arm and deliberately not treat it. And if the child survives, it will be like that. This cannot happen. You see, this cannot happen. It's happening. It's happening. Nobody is looking at it. You see, there is a huge blind area in our country where neither the legal system nor the medical system is looking at. The sociologists need to look at it. Okay? And you can't criticize this person or that person. You need to find out, what are these people doing? How are these people coping? And your writing about it is very important. You must write about it. Because, what do the medical profession doesn't know what these people need. They have no idea. It's not there in the medical textbooks. The psychologists don't know. Psychiatrists don't know. They'll treat depression, they'll treat anxiety, they'll treat schizophrenia or something like that. But there's a huge hole here which needs to be looked at.
How do you suggest that going forward? Is this something that there should be representation on behalf of the community to go ahead and speak? I'm actually speechless because I don't know from where it will start, because there's so much and so many things that's unaddressed, unheard, and unspoken.
This thought actually came to me the first time when we had the initial discussion. You said that these people are going to some clinics. What are these clinics? Where are these clinics? You see, this is the problem. It is quite possible that some of these clinics are actually A, illegal, B, possibly supported by criminals, and possibly helped by, perhaps law officials who turn a blind eye for a little exchange of some kind of, a sweetener. So there is something seriously wrong here. And you have to start from grassroots. What sort of medical treatment do, say, transgenders or any of these marginalized groups need outside of what are normal illnesses that anybody else, because here is a special group. They have certain special needs. Ordinary broken arms, cataract, heart attack, this anybody will treat for anybody. They're not going to look at the gender or the lifestyle part of it. So, somebody has to document these are the needs. One. Second question is, where is it being done? Now, where is it being done may be a problem, because here if you ask my personal opinion, I don't know, I don't have the facts. There is definitely illegal things going on. And when you start exposing illegal things, you start coming under personal attack, because the criminal mafia will not like it. So this is a serious issue. Even I don't know how to address it. And the first time I thought about addressing it was when I met you. Because, I am going to be 67 literally day after tomorrow. Okay? And 67 years, I've spent my life more than 40 years as a surgeon, and I have no clue. Who is going to help me? Who is going to teach me? This is the question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiv, for being on today's podcast. I'm sure for all the listeners, there's so much that he's thrown light on. And for me to really sit down and ponder, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mohua.
Thank you. To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk ईमानदारी से.